Okay, last up for this section, we are going to look at topic 5, which is rounding decimals. And I'll tell you that rounding decimals is almost identical to rounding whole numbers. You find your rounding digit, you determine if the digit to the right of that is 5 or above or less than 5, round up or down. And then the only difference is after the decimal point, we just chop everything off. Okay, whereas with whole numbers, after the decimal point, we made everything zeros. So that's the only difference, and it's really quite minor. Okay. So steps for rounding a decimal follow the steps for rounding from section 1.5. So we can talk about that as we go through these problems. And then drop off all digits after the rounding digit given by place value. Okay, so example 6 is round each number to the given place value. We have 14.9835, which is really 14, and 9,835 10,000ths. Okay, but again, you kind of see why sometimes we just say 0.9835. It's less, it's not quite the mouthful, okay? But in this case, we want to round it to the hundredths place. So remember, 100 has two zeros, so we're looking at two decimal places in. So in this case, the 8 is what we call our rounding digit. So that digit is the one that we're either rounding up or down. Now, the digit to the right of that, the 3, tells me if I'm rounding up or down. Since 3 is less than 5, that tells me I'm going to round down. That means I leave the 8 alone, and then everything after that, I just kind of drop it off. I chop it off, and I don't need it anymore. So we would say this is approximately 14.98. Okay? Now for part B, we have negative 2.98, and we're rounding to the tenths place. So remember, 10 has 1 0, so we're looking one decimal place in. Well, the digit to the right of that is an 8, and that is definitely more than 5. So that tells me I need to round up. And the way we round up is we add 1 to the rounding digit, okay? So we have to add 1 to 9, which really makes 9 a 10. So we keep a 0 and we carry the 1, so that becomes a 3. And then we just chop off the 8. We don't need the 8 anymore. So we would say that this one is, whoops, approximately -3. We don't even need the point zero. We can just say -3 in this case. Okay. And then finally, for part C, you could definitely be asked to round to the nearest dollar or the nearest cent. Okay. So nearest dollar is the ones place, and nearest cent, hopefully you can kind of envision walking through a store. When we walk through a store, price tags always have two decimal places because that represents the cents. Okay, so this would always be the hundredths place. So the nearest dollar, ones place, nearest cent is always the hundredths place. And remember, 100 has two zeros, so that's two decimal places in. Okay, so we want to round this 6. The 6 is in the rounding digit spot. The digit to the right of that always tells us if we round up or down. Well, to the right of 6, we have an 8, which tells me to round up. So I want to add 1 to my 6. Well, that makes the 6 a 7. Everything before that is the same. And then I chop off everything after that. So this 8, we just chop it off. So 217.568 is closer to $217.57 than it would have been to $217.56. Okay, so that is rounding. Again, it's identical to what we do with whole numbers. You just have to make sure you know the place value, and then at the end, you just chop everything after the decimal place off, or after the rounding digit. You chop it off when you're done rounding.